All right, guys. Well, we're finally back. I know that we're a day late, but these are the things that happen, especially when there's success in the woods. Hunting first, podcast second. Just the way that these cookies crumble. So this is your boy East Coast Trev with my good buddy, Mr. Madman Mardick.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Glad. Good.
Still pulling prickers out my ass, but I'm here.
I don't know why you would be doing that, buddy.
Shit got a little wild, but we're good. We survived.
It's one of those things. I mean, like, if I just opened up Hunt Stand and did things properly, then we probably wouldn't have had any problems. But, I didn't do that, so that's how this goes.
I mean, I did, but
You did?
we won't talk about that.
Oh,
But
you did.
it's all good. It was fun. We
I,
got some laughs out of it.
what's funny is that if you really think about it, if I was to go, if we went too far right, if we went to go left, like where we were tracking down on the back of the pond and we came up that way, it would have been way easier, I think. But that's my opinion. I was thinking about this when I got home.
The old woulda, coulda, shoulda club,
Bro, I used to see my
I'm a
arm and my
Gold
knees
Star
from
member.
plowing through that. It was ruthless, bro. I'm telling you. So, anyways, yesterday, things got a little crazy in Western. I went in on this buck that I've been chasing here, and what's crazy is I've been thinking a lot about that deer. I really want to kill that deer. Man. I don't know why. I've never had an attraction to something that I've never seen before. Like just knowing like what it is. But anyways, so I went in there and right before last light, dude, things just kind of got a little havoc. I ended up shooting one. Mardick was coming to meet me, and because we were going to do the intro for the podcast, I had some gear from Latitude, and we were just like, it was going to be good. Well, I ended up shooting a deer. We went in there, tracked it. It was just a nightmare. But anyways, we got it out, and now we're back on track, and it is what it is. Just meat in the freezer and the monkeys off the old back, dude. I appreciate you coming and help me out, even though we had to walk through Narnia to get back to the truck. But
Nah, it was worth it, dude. I live for that shit. You know what I mean? And I'm just glad I was there, and I'm glad it worked out the way it did because at one time we were talking about, maybe I'll come. If you were to shoot one,
right.
I'll just come up. I'll help you get it out or record the intro. And then I thought about it. I was like, I'm just heading your way no matter what. If you shoot one, we'll deal with it. If you don't, we'll record the intro. And then you ended up shooting one. We dealt with it and didn't record the intro, but it all worked out.
Yeah, it totally did, and it was crazy because like I don't know, it was just wild, and it was nice to just get the monkey off the old back because it was kind of funny, and I'll talk about this for a minute because so there was a piece of public, and I now moved, so it was the closest piece of public track to me, and I didn't have much time to scout. As you guys all know, work and all the things that are going on, no excuses, but I just decided that I was going to go hunt. We all talked about all this stuff, so I went in there and found a bunch of scrapes and good mature buck habitat from where I was gonna chase this buck. Well, every night that I would go in there, I'd see 5 does. But they would be like 50 yards off from where I was. And then they're 50 yards off, 50 yards off. Well, I went in there and they were close enough, so I just shot one. And then just all havoc broke loose. But it was good. We had a lot of fun last night, going through the ditches, falling on my ass, and just living it up. It was a blast. It really was. It was all good, dude. But,
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Do you have any Killer's Corners this week, buddy?
I do.
I know we're gonna kind of pedal through this intro so we can get this podcast up and out and going because we're a little bit behind.
Oh, way behind. Kent Lewis with a buck, and I got Frank Fellows with his very first deer. So congratulations.
That was super cool. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So
That's
congrats to you guys. Make sure you guys get on over to the podcast Facebook page over there, The Outdoor Drive. That's the Outdoor Drive family, we call that. That's where you can post up and be part of the Killer's Corner every single week. So go and check those guys out. Give us a follow on there and just kind of chime in what's going on throughout the season, rut reports, so on and so forth. We always ask crazy questions like, what are you going to do with ground venison? But we appreciate it there.
Basic white girl stuff.
Basic white girl stuff. So let's get to the sponsors. Huntworth Gear, huntworthgear.com. The best, some of the greatest products. Right now there is a sale going on. There's a link that we posted on our Facebook and on our Instagram. And you can also use the promo code HNT20CT to get an extra 20%. So you're actually getting 70% off on those. Latitude
Hold on
Outdoors.
a sec.
Oh,
You know what I was thinking about the other day? A product from Huntworth that we don't talk about that has been the MVP of the season so far
what's that?
is the Winstead jacket,
Yes,
the rain jacket.
the rain jacket.
I'm a big Shelton hoodie guy, but that Winstead jacket has been putting in work this season.
Yeah, with all the rain, dude, it's just constant rain. But no, I'm a Shelton hoodie guy. I'm sorry.
For
Shelton
sure.
hoodie for sure. Latitude Outdoors, latitudeoutdoors.com. If you guys haven't gone over there, make sure to use the promo code Outdoor Drive to save yourself 20% on that. And there is still the rope upgrade one if you guys are getting 10 millimeter ropes from those guys. There is a bunch of sticks and platforms back in stock. The things are going. We just got our carbon sticks. So we're going to be testing those out. We'll be talking to you about those soon here coming up. Nor'easter Game Calls, nor'eastergamecalls.com. If you guys haven't gone and checked out the grunt tubes over there, it is almost rut. These are the best grunt tubes on the market. I can't stress it enough. If you don't have one in your pack, you probably shouldn't even go into the woods. That's my personal opinion. I take two just in case because that's what you do.
Because Trev happens.
Well, exactly. Trez bloopers. That's just the way of the world. Bowhunters United, bowhuntersunited.com. If you guys, they are the advocate for us archery hunters. It is a free sign up on there at bowhuntersunited.com. And that's it, guys. If you guys haven't gone over to any of our social media platforms and follow over there, or on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you guys do that, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. So that's it, man. You got anything else before we close this out and get on over to Kyle with chasing the big Northeast Slam?
No, I got nothing.
I know it's been a quiet week. We're just trying to get. This should have came out yesterday, but
I'm looking forward to this weekend. It's gonna be warm though, man.
I know,
The
70,
heat wave.
Time wise,
It's like be careful what you wish for, right? It's like rain, 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 rain. It's like stop raining, so it stops raining. Now it's 80 degrees. It's like, can I get a little cold front? Like, what's up?
It's coming, dude. Just let the weekend go by, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be down in the 30s next week. So, well,
For sure.
Let's turn it on over to Kyle, man. Let's get on with the podcast.
Do it.
The Outdoor Drive Podcast.
All right, we're back on the phone with Bentall. What's up, man? How are you? I mean, wow, no, Kyle Bentall. See, I can't even get anything right here, man. I'm sorry. Bentall, right? Bentall. No, I screwed up again.
Honestly, most people in high school and college called me Bentall anyways. They didn't call me Kyle. So
see, I knew your nickname, and you didn't even know that I knew your nickname, right? Like, that's reality of it, right?
Must have been in the stars. The stars just aligned.
Yep, the moon phase told me.
The moon phase. So, Kyle, what's up, man? How are you?
Good. Just got back from a hunt, so I was a little late, so that's why I moved it from 7 to 7:30. I apologize.
Oh, dude, it's all good. It's nice. I got out of work a little bit later than usual. We're waiting on weather and stuff, so it's all good, man. It all worked out. You've been grinding. You know, for us, hunting comes first, podcast comes second. It's always, that's just the way it goes. So when you're hunting, man. If you killed a deer, we would have, we just would have done this on Sunday. It's just the way that it goes. It is what it is. Well, man, let's get this thing underway. Let's turn the key. We'll put this thing straight in 4-wheel drive. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do, Kyle?
Sure. So my name is Kyle Bentall. I live in southern New Hampshire. So if you've ever heard of the Brookline cutting barn, that kind of thing, I live in Brookline. Anytime I say that, people are like, oh, there's massive deer in Brookline, but it's not really the case. A lot of them come from like Mason or Hollis. So it's kind of funny when people talk about all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I didn't grow up in hunting. My parents are from England. I basically started hunting when I was 17 or 18, did like one season, never saw anything, killed like forkhorn. And then I came home from college in a church mission that I went on. Um, and then I just started grinding. So 2020 was my first season in New England. And I harvested 5 deer with my bow. And then I went to college in Idaho for 2 years. So I got a mule deer and two whitetails over 120 inches with a bow from the ground. And then back to this year that I've got two more Pope and Youngs down so far. So
So let's talk about this for a second too, because you kind of you struck the nail right on the head, man. What got you into hunting? Like, what was the drive to get yourself into hunting, and how did you formulate like to get yourself into hunting? Because obviously, like not growing up in it, me and Steve have both come from families that are hardcore outdoorsmen, and like hunting and fishing and whatever the case may be, like it was a lifestyle for us. So like, where did the page turn for you to be in the outdoors?
yeah, so I mean, growing up in southern New Hampshire, I mean, I was always outdoors. That's just always the way I was raised. Like I always had like a little bow, but that was more just like shooting in the backyard. My dad doesn't hunt, so we didn't know what we were doing. I never really went out hunting. It was mostly just like screwing around with myself. Fishing, I'd say, was my first love. So that kind of transitioned me into it. I did like guiding bass fishing. I started the high school bass fishing team in my hometown. Um, got like scholarship money for that, and that's kind of like what started my passion into hunting. But I had a really good mentor named Larry Rankin. He was one of the VP of sales of Ray Marina fishing sonars,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was the VP of Boyd Duckett fishing. And he's a huge hunter, and he kind of mentored me along with a guy down the street that I know, and I just grew up seeing all the mounts on his wall, and that kind of I just always was fascinated and never did it myself until I was older, and my parents were kind of like, "Oh, we don't want you going out with a gun or a bow on your own." So I always wanted to, I just didn't when I was younger. So
And then you went to school in Idaho, and then you were able to even hunt out west.
yeah, so I actually killed both of those deer with my buddy Chase's bow tech, so it wasn't my own bow either, which is kind of funny. So yeah, I just did a lot of e-scouting with Onyx and knock a lot of doors. So
Well, so when you were in Idaho, like, and you're saying e-scouting or e-scouting back home, are you talking about?
like Onyx, like
Yeah, but did
um,
you here, like Northeast, or was it Idaho where you were doing a lot of the e-scouting?
both.
Okay.
When I was out there, just where I was at the time. So like here, I e-scouted when I was here in 2020, and then when I was out there, I e-scouted all the time after college classes or whatever.
So my question to this, right? So like guys that are e-scouting and like myself, right? Like e-scouting really wasn't a huge thing when we were kids and we were growing up. We were just woodsmen, right? That like you would go in the woods and you kind of would see where the paths go or whatever the case may be, and you just kind of rummage through the woods, right? So being a newer hunter in 2020 or whatever and you're e-scouting, like, and you're probably listening to podcasts or or watching YouTube videos, or you're listening to or watching hunting shows, and guys would talk about topographical maps and stuff. Like, how did you take that all in and like start to understand, like, not being and stepping in the woods and not knowing some of that stuff and being a newer hunter and then turning that into e-scouting?
Yeah, so I kind of started, I want to say that I kind of grew up in the same way that people that did hunt, um, like in the fact that I knew woodsmanship. Like I'm an Eagle Scout, like I always was outside, like I understand sign, I understand rubs and scrapes, like I understand those things, but I just wasn't hunting. So I was
Okay.
tracking deer, I was finding sheds when I was 16, like I was still like looking for antlers and stuff, but I wasn't necessarily a hunter.
You just didn't
So
carry a bow, but you were a hunter
exactly,
without a bow and arrow, more or less.
100%. So like that's the way I grew up. I was always in the woods.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference is like when I started e-scouting, it took some time, but I never listened to podcasts. That wasn't really a thing when I grew up either. Um, and then I didn't watch a lot of like people that were like hunting like the
Seek
Lee
one
and
or
Tiffany
yeah.
or Sequan. Like I watched that stuff for entertainment, but when I wanted to learn, I would watch people like Jacob Schmidt, which probably nobody knows about. but he did like topography maps and like showed you how to look at different things. Like he would do videos, but it's just his voice and he would show you on a map. That's one of the biggest things I would learn. And then I got into John Eberhart's stuff and became really good friends with him over email. And then we started to call back and forth and kind of built my relationship with him and got into scent lock and kind of got down that rabbit hole of understanding the wind, thermals, and bedding areas, and then that kind of just exploded into this addiction that I have now. So
Are you one of those guys that and drank the Kool-Aid on the whole scent lock thing, like from start to finish, like a John Eberhart, or is it not as strong?
I will tell people if you're not going to play the wind for like yourself. There's two different types of people, in my opinion. There's the people that will never hunt an area if the wind's not correct. There's the people that are kind of like in the middle where they don't know anything. And then there's the other people that use scent lock that are like, oh, I don't care about the wind. I'm kind of in the middle because I understand the wind, I understand thermals, but the difference is I use the wind in the buck's favor, not in mine. And what I mean that is a lot of people, when they like kill a big buck or say, oh, I'm going to go hunt down here, you'd be like, oh, the wind's wrong. But the wind's wrong for you, but it's right for him. So the best thing that I can do is put myself in a good position where he's hopefully not going to smell me. So I try to cover it up the best I can. I I use scent lock, yes, but I don't think that that's like a eliminates everything. So I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, but I use it the best I can.
And so my thing
Even
would, oh,
you
go
haven't
ahead.
bought a minivan- you haven't bought a minivan yet to travel back and forth to hunt, like John.
No, I use an airtight tote and I use my Corolla. I've killed all my deer with the Corolla, so
I was a Honda Civic guy for a long time, so I get it and understand it, Kyle. It's totally fine.
yeah.
One of the things with ScentLock, in my opinion, honestly, and I've talked to John too. We've had him on the podcast and had these conversations. But like, if you're gonna ScentLock, it's 100% ScentLock. It's not
Yep.
you. If you're going to ScentLock, it's not just having a pair of ScentLock pants. You need to
Oh
have
no, not at
the
all.
hat, the mask, the gloves. You have to be covered head to toe in ScentLock for that to work properly in the manner that it's supposed to be working in with, you know, as far as going down the minivan route, right? Like just
Yeah.
in because scent lock is one of those things with that carbon inside of it that you have to be full fledged. You can't have Huntworth on the top and scent lock on the bottom. It just doesn't work like that. Like you have to be full top to bottom
No,
with
yeah.
scent
I
lock.
I am I am head to toe. Like the only thing that I might not cover with the activated carbon is the gloves
Right.
once I'm in the tree stand. But that's like usually in the warmer weather. So I mean, I have a top layer, a bottom layer. I have the hat with the sheath that comes over.
Mhm.
Because unless you're doing like the face paint, like you need to have something covering your face. So obviously I do the full scent lock thing. I guess you could say I am 100% in. I just don't think that it's, how do I say
The
this?
end all be
Uh,
all.
it's not a cult. I feel like you can kill deer in places like Idaho. I don't have to wear scent lock. The deer are retarded. Like, excuse my language,
You're
but
fine.
the deer like are are a lot more dumb than the Northeast. Like they'll come right through the middle of a cow pasture in the middle of the daytime and not even care. They're just rutting and stuff. Like we don't see that in New England where they're just running through fields during broad daylight.
So are you
Um,
saying that the people
Pre-rut
in the Midwest and the West have it a lot easier than we do here in the Northeast?
for quality, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not
Simply
quality. I
put.
was just saying.
No, it's the only difference is the land. So everything there is leased or it's private where whitetails are. Same thing in the Midwest. The hard part is understanding like the land access is limited, but there's bigger deer.
Hmm.
So here, obviously it's different. If a 200-inch deer or a six-year-old deer is going to be smart anywhere. But I'm saying like the bucks in general, like I didn't have to really do anything, and I saw a buck every single night in Idaho.
They say that shooting a 125 in the Northeast is like shooting a 180 in the Midwest.
I would agree with that. I'd say probably more like 170,
Yeah.
165, but yeah.
It's
180 is a good buck anywhere.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, and I've always said this, like, if you take some hardcore big woods Northeast dudes and you put them in the Midwest, like, the success rate, I think I would honestly put myself and a group of guys from the Northeast against anybody in the Midwest, in my opinion. And I know that that's kind of bold and that's kind of crazy, but, like, the way that we hunt and the way that we have to grind every single day to shoot a 125 here, to then put ourselves out there to shoot a 140, is like totally different. And understanding the way that thermals work and the woods work, like, we have to put ourselves in a position to make ourselves successful here a little bit more than they do kind of in the Midwest. And I've hunted the Midwest and I understand it, like, there's a lot of like peninsulas and ag, so it's pretty simple. Like, there's small wooden lots, and this isn't everywhere, dude. This isn't everywhere. This is
No,
just
100%.
like this is a blanket clause, right? Where a lot of those areas that are trenches or small fingers of woods, like, if those deer aren't in those woods, go to the next finger. Where we might have to walk 5 miles to get to that next finger, quote unquote, where those deer might be, or that next, topographical feature where those deer might be. Like, it's a little bit harder. Steve, would you attest to that? Or I see the faces coming on that are like,
the biggest thing that I see in combat is property lines. So you might have a finger on your property, but they're not there. You can't do anything about the deer that are on the next property over, the next property over. So a lot of times we're sitting, transition between bedding and feed or something like that. You might have the feed, you might have the bedding, you probably don't have both, you might not have either, and you're just sitting there waiting to try to catch them between parcels. You don't have the ability to go to where the deer are.
Exactly.
You kind of have to catch them where you have the ability to catch them.
okay, let me throw some wrenches into this. Kyle, you being in the northern part of the Northeast, where New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine are both trespass states, where you can go on any property unless it's posted. So does that make it easier for you?
In terms of being able to cover ground, sure, but the quality is far worse for that reason. There's a lot more land, but it might not necessarily be quality. So that's why I'm saying the ability to access land is what's different. So if you go to Iowa, it's all posted unless you know someone. You can't get on a piece of property
So it's a
unless,
money
of course,
game at
it's
that
public.
point.
Oh, 100%. Here, you have to grind to find a 125. There, if I'm in another state, if I spook a 125, it's not the end of the world. There's another one a mile down the street. Here, if I want a 150, there's only one within 15 miles or whatever. I got to go far away to find another one.
Right.
That's kind of the difference that I've seen.
Exactly. And if he's living on the neighbor's property 90% of the time, you're just sitting in a tree on the property that you're on, waiting for him that one day that he decides to come through the piece you can hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Where the Midwest game is a money game.
I mean, you can ask Josh Bomar himself. I don't know. Like, there's just
hey.
I'm not saying that he's a bad hunter at all. Like, I love those guys, and I think all the Midwest is great. It's just ability to access land. That's simply put. Like, there's some places that have genetics. There's less hunting pressure, and that's why there's bigger bucks. You just need an age class. That's why Pennsylvania, the deer have gotten bigger over the years, especially on the private land, is because they have an antler restriction.
So, well, bucks per square mile is obviously higher, and also the size quality per square mile is obviously higher too, right? I mean, like,
yeah,
where we might have, well, just for number sakes, 5 per square mile, they have 10 per square mile, but those 10 that are in that square mile are 5 of them are 125 and bigger. Where we have 1 of the 5 here are 125 or bigger, right? I mean, that would be maybe, right? Like 110. I guess that's why our Northeast Big Buck Club is 110 to be in the club, and where the Midwest is to be in the Ohio.
Is that it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Northeast Big Buck Club, just to be registered in the Buck Club, is 110, bud, and it's 125 Pope and Young. Pope and Young's 125. Boone and Crockett's 160 or 170. So, like for example, Ohio Big Buck Club has to be 160 or better to be part of their book club, where we're only 110. So like that probably has a lot to do with it. Like as far as
and there's even a difference from New Hampshire to Massachusetts too. Let me be like honest about that too. Like New Hampshire, 100% harder than Eastern Mass. Like I can go to Eastern Mass and see a doe anytime I want. Like almost any time I want in the suburbs. On it's private land that I've knocked on doors and got permission.
right.
But I could say I could see like this season I've seen more bucks than does in Mass. It's just
Really?
because there's a bigger population. There's just more of them. They might not be huge. They might be fork horns or small 8-pointers or whatever, but they're bigger than New Hampshire.
Go ahead, Steve. I know you got something to say.
Sorry, Steve, I cut you off.
No.
No. I had a couple things, but that's right. Now that I think about it, though, like we've all e-scouted like the Midwest, right? Like Trev was saying earlier, when you look down on an aerial photo, right? You have all that ag, and then you have these little pockets of hardwoods, and the deer can only be in so many places, right? Because they're not out in the middle of the field all day, so they have to be in these little blocks of timber, right? It's almost very similar to those suburban pockets, like you're talking in Eastern Mass, right? You have all these houses and all these neighborhoods with these little pockets of timber. So if you turn all those houses into ag field, it's almost like the Midwest, right? So like that's what would make suburban hunting that much more easier, because those deer are only in those little tiny pockets of timber between all these houses. So,
but here's the main difference is how far they travel during the season. The core area of a buck in the Midwest, I know people that can hold a mature buck on 40 acres. You could never hold a buck in New Hampshire in 40 acres. Mass, maybe, if you're lucky. Like the one that I hunted was very rare. Like moose had a small core range, but most of the bucks that like I hunt in New Hampshire travel 6 to 8 miles.
because of the lack of food?
I don't know if it is just the lack of food, because even in some like southern New Hampshire places where there is some ag, they still travel quite a bit. But maybe it has to do with the white oaks and
Right.
them traveling from them past the red oaks, because they don't care about the red oaks really. But
You don't think so? So if
or
there's
it's hunting
not,
pressure, I don't know.
you don't think that like, and I agree with you, right? So as far as the red oaks, where white oaks are more of a prevalent area for them to be eating like this time of year, like red oaks are a later time of the year. But if there's not any white oaks, are they eating the red oaks? Are they eating hickory nuts or beech nuts? Like what else are they eating? And the reason I ask this, and it's not to put you on the spot or anything like this, right, Kyle? Like,
Oh, I don't mind.
there was a property that I've been hunting, and all it is red oaks. There's hickories there, but the ground is tore up. Are they eating the red oaks, or are they eating something else that's there that I'm not seeing?
Is the ground tore up because they're getting in the mood, or is it getting torn up because they're eating the red oaks though?
It looks like they're eating the red oaks.
Are there like a bunch? It's hard to determine between like
Right.
squirrels and obviously like.
Well,
the
I know that
caps of
it's
them,
deer
but-
because they're going into there. I'm watching them
Oh,
go
okay.
into this red oak
Gotcha.
flat.
Yeah, it also depends on the red oak tree. So like everything's not equal. So a lot of them you open them up and they're rotten inside.
Mm-hmm.
So many years, especially this year in particular, I'm going past red oaks and opening them up and they're like completely worthless. And we always hear, oh, they're bitter and the deer don't like them as much. It's like, of course, if there's like a little snack, yeah, but beech nuts and white oaks, obviously, they're going to eat those because they're a delicacy. I'd say majority of the food that they eat is browse, of course, so not just the white oaks. So that answers your other question for like what are other things. And then if you get into the Mass or the some places in southern New Hampshire, you have ryegrass, you have pumpkin patches, apple trees. In Maine, on the island that I went to, there's crab apple trees. Every food source is kind of different, but I don't know if that answered your question, but
No,
I
it did,
think they
for
still
sure.
eat the red oaks.
Me too.
Uh,
I think that one of the things that I've learned over the years is that the reason they don't eat them is because their body can't break them down. because of the acid, right? That's what they're
Yeah,
saying.
it has to do with tannins.
Tannins, that's
And
what I
Yeah,
meant. Yeah.
what they dye coffee with or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right. So the red oaks, I
or
think, are
tea.
I'm kind of bullshitting and making this up, but from what I can remember off the top of my head, the red oaks are higher in tannins, and the white oaks are not. So it's almost like the white oaks are like ready to eat right away. So
I've heard the
they can
same.
digest them and get the nutrients out of the white oaks. Where like the red oaks, I think they almost have to like sit on the ground a little bit longer or something like
Break
that.
down
So
the tannins in them, I guess.
that's why they'll walk past the red oaks to get to the white.
Mm.
Could be
I'm
wrong. I
also
might need to
pretty
fact check
sure
that.
the red oaks take multiple years to grow and drop, and white oaks they grow every year.
Correct.
Could be wrong, but that's what I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. We need young Jamie to fact check that for us, but
Yeah.
we don't have one of those.
From Joe Rogan. We take Jamie from us. Like,
Hey, Jamie, can you look that up?
Jamie, look that up.
I would love that. That would be the greatest thing in the world, right? Well, Kyle, now that we've
Hey, Jamie, can you Google that for me? I can't do a Joe Rogan impression.
No. All right, Kyle. We've done enough of the business stuff, dude. Break it down for us, man. You've had probably one of the best Northeast seasons I've seen thus far. And let's be honest, starting off in Maine, Mass, New Hampshire, back to Mass. So why don't you lay it down, man? Season. Let's start it from the beginning. How you found some of these deer and how you ended up making yourself successful and putting yourself in the position to be successful this season.
Yeah, man. I don't know about that. I'm sure there's people that have a lot more successful seasons. They just don't post it on social media. I think that's a very finite thing. Is like some people don't post, some people do. So I also
Hold on,
keep
Kyle. Time out. Yo, John Eberhart and
Dan Infalt?
Dan Infalt, them boys, they don't post on social media.
Fuck, I can't think of their names right now.
We did this last time. I am so sorry. They're New Hampshire boys also. Huh?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh man, they're gonna kill us.
God,
Yeah, Gallagher.
on the spot.
Yeah, but anyways, those guys have killed numerous. They've been on Hunt Suburbia. Do you know who we're talking about?
We're talking about Isaac Young and Nate Corey or them.
No, they're older gentlemen.
Ken? I don't know.
Ken and anyways, we'll go on. But anyways, those guys have killed like 200 and something deer in the Northeast, and they're probably shot 25 this year, and they haven't even posted on the internet. But go ahead, go on with yourself. I'm sorry, Kyle.
If I didn't pass $18 for every one big one, I'd have 1,000,000 deer on the ground. But I'm a little picky, to be honest with you. But
That's
like,
good though.
I passed one 4 times this season that everybody's pissed at me because I passed him. He was like a 7 point that's like 19 inches wide. But I think he's a 3.5 or 4-year-old deer that has a lot of potential. He just doesn't have very long tines. But anyway, so the main buck, there wasn't a crazy amount of skill. My buddy basically lived out on this unknown island that I won't say to ruin it for everyone, but it gets a lot of hunting pressure. And it's the same thing with access. Everything's really posted. If it's not posted, you can hunt it. But there's a lot of deer per square mile on the main islands. And that buck, we had known about him. I had trail camera photos of him, and there's a lot bigger one out on an island off of the main island. But this one was basically chilling in this lady's backyard, hitting the primary scrape area. So I sat on a saddle in a hang-on tree stand, and he came through the night that I wanted him to. So 3 days before on Instagram, I said, "Hey, the new moon is on the 14th." And then hopefully I'll give him 3 days before or 3 days after. And it was 3 days before on the 11th. And that's when he came out like 45 minutes before sunset, and shot him, watched him, everything hanging out right behind his shoulder. Bedded down, tried to get up again, stumbled, did the wobble, sat down, and then went and found him in the morning. So
Jeez. And what made yourself successful? But where did you put yourself in a certain area that you knew he had been frequenting, or what was kind of what'd you do to put yourself in the position to be able to be successful?
I just stayed mobile. That one, honestly, was just it was really easy because it was September 11th, so he was still in a bed to food pattern. So there wasn't much skill to that one. It was just he was doing the same thing. It was just a matter of not spooking him because since they get so much hunting pressure, they get bumped around a bunch. Um, so that one wasn't really special by any means. I just set up on the edge of the bedding area and some thick crap on a saddle where I knew the thermals would blow over him because I knew if he would side hill
Mm-hmm.
this and I would sit up on the ridge and it basically drops off and he would come up it, so I knew my scent would go over the top. But yeah,
There's nothing
that
wrong
one
with
that
that,
was
man. It was
yeah
success. Success is
yeah
success, which was it was a great buck by all
yeah
means.
yeah. It was my third spot that day, so I was moving around because the mosquitoes were terrible. This was before I had a thermocell, and I also believe that deer can smell that, so that's a whole nother story. But I was getting bitten alive at one spot that morning, and I was like, I'm gonna move spots. Went to the next spot, and then I saw like a 6 point and a small 8 point in velvet, and then I went back to this spot in the afternoon, and that's when I killed the big one.
So you actually moved yourself around that much?
Yeah, that one day. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So
Normally I don't fling around like that,
you
but
don't know?
no, I mean I am
All
mobile,
right, a
but
couple of
if I'm moving spots, like even sometimes like if I'll spook deer, I'll still go to a similar spot. I'll just set up a little bit differently in a different tree. I almost
Mm-hmm.
never sit the same tree unless it's like I have some spots that are like if the deer want to smell me, there's no way. Like I had a doe go back and forth 16 times because she saw me visually, like in a tree, but she didn't know what I was and she couldn't smell me. She went downwind, went around the whole ridge, and still didn't know what I was. Like just because she's
I get pissed. I had one do that to me a couple weeks ago. It's
yeah.
actually funny. What? Give me a time frame on these moves. So it's September 11th. That's early season. So
Yep.
you went in the dark, I would imagine, in the morning.
So for this one, yeah, I went in the morning, but I didn't kill him till the afternoon, to be
Right. So
clear. Yeah.
what time was your first tear down and move?
Okay, let's see. So my first teardown move was probably 8 o'clock.
Okay.
And then from like 8 to 11, or no, 8 to 12, I went back to
Yep.
the house or whatever.
Okay.
And then I went back out from like 12 to 2:30, and I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I was hunting a swamp edge, and it's just like, I mean, I counted 48 bug bites on my arms, and I'm like, and that was with my like thick clothes on. I'm like, nope. It was probably 75 degrees. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So then the hurricane was also coming.
Hmm.
Well, hurricane
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the time in Maine. So it was literally 2 days before that hit. So I was like, okay, you know what? They're going to be on their feet. I knew he was going to be moving earlier than normal. So I'm like, I have nothing to lose. Let me just go hunt this saddle and hope he comes to this scrape on the edge of his bedding area. And luckily enough, he came out and I just see these antlers shimmer and I was like, holy crap. And then he came in. He actually put his feet out like I don't know if you know like dog stretch and like yawn. He put his
Mm-hmm.
2 feet out and he had piebald feet. So like that's the first thing I noticed about him. He like put his white socks out and he was like stretching and he didn't like something because I was so pissed about the bugs. I was like, screw it. And I sprayed some bug spray in my neck and he smelled that like 100% because it went right down to where like the shooting lane was. And I was like, crap. So then he tried to circle up around me to get my wind of what I was. So he starts circling down, and I had this set up where I knew if a buck tried to go downwind, I'd have a 20-yard shot anyways. So I had one little shooting lane, and I just went right through him. So
That's awesome. Hell yeah. Well, he's down. That was a good buck,
yeah,
though.
yeah,
He's a stud, especially Maine. Maine's a tough state, dude. Like, that's not an easy state to
yeah,
be killing that class of deer. I mean, that's a beautiful buck.
yeah. It's hard to get a big buck in Maine. I'd say like unless you're in like northern Maine, like obviously you get like the 230 pound weight and stuff. Like this buck was maybe 150 pounds. Like he was
Really?
so light. Yeah, like they
For
just don't
Maine,
get
that's
big on.
crazy.
On
Oh,
the
it's an
island, it's
island.
because it's an island. So that's the difference is like, there's a lot of deer and like there's a lot of big caliber of deer. Like there's like a 160 my buddy's after on like one of the islands off of some main islands. Like there's just big deer there. I don't know if it's the genetics. There's a lot of apples and different things they can feed on. They even sometimes will like eat the seaweed. Like the Maine state record had
Yeah.
erosion from its antlers from like eating seaweed and like going in the ocean all the time. They'll swim miles, like even up at Lake Winnipesaukee with like the Just Hunt Club. Like those deer will swim across big lakes
Hmm.
all the time.
Look at Block Island. They're on Block Island. They're on Nantucket. They're on all of these places, and they see them on the beach all the time. And one of the things, I mean, my opinion, right? Like them being down in the sand or on the ocean, then now it's salt, which is minerals, which that's why a lot of these islands, there's a lot of them. Plum Island. I won't name all of them because they don't need to get recognition here on the
Oh, I hear
podcast.
you.
But Nantucket, Block Island, stuff like that. Like there's big
I
antler deer because they're down getting these minerals and then growing these giant antlers from the
Yeah.
ocean, right? Real quick, it was Jim Gallagher and
Oh yeah,
Keith
Jim. Yep.
Keith Regan.
Keith, I said Ken. Sorry, Keith. Love
Keith,
you, bud.
Keith and Jim, man, those guys are just absolute savage. We need to get them on the podcast.
Yeah, they're good
Ain't
dudes.
coming on now. We don't even know their names.
Yeah, well, we did that before. John Eberhart and and Dan Infalt. That's what
I
we
had
call
Jim
them.
right. And I thought I said Ken instead of Keith. But
Yeah, it's Keith and
forget.
Jim. It just came to me.
Would you do
Great
text young
dudes.
Jamie?
What's that?
Would you do text young Jamie?
No, I didn't text. Yeah, I did. I texted young Jamie. Jamie, can you read this one for me, bud? Reach this out. So, but anyways, so the main buck's down, dude. Now we're into Mass. So take us through Mass and how that went and occurred.
Oh man, so this buck I've never worked harder for a deer in my life. Like especially like one specific deer. I chased a New Hampshire state record one that was like top 10 all time, and that was the biggest buck that I've ever chased. I had 6 encounters in person with that deer, but this deer like I had probably 800 trail camera photos of him. This is my first year running cell cameras, and that was like a huge help to know that he was consistently coming in. And it was in a suburban area, so I knocked like 80 something doors and tried to get all these different spots, and I ended up getting like 20 or 30 of them. And a lot of the places that said no to me, I'm like, well, if I get one, can I drag it through your property or go search if I get one? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. And some of the places where you can get around like the 500 feet rule. So for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, you have to be a certain distance from a house. So you can't pull a
With a bow.
seek one and be shooting with a bow from a backyard. You can't do it unless you have permission. Like if you're far enough away from someone else's
And
house.
that's Massachusetts has a 500 foot, even if you're bow
Yeah.
hunting. Okay, because
Yeah.
Connecticut we don't. We don't have a 500 foot
Oh,
rule
really?
unless you're discharging a firearm. So I can literally be in your backyard. I can be in the tree that's next to your green grass, and I can shoot a deer. So
Really?
if public land abuts your backyard, I can be in the tree that is on the line as long as I'm shooting back onto public land. There is no distance from an occupied dwelling with a bow and arrow, only with a gun.
That's crazy.
I think it's crazy. You got to be 500 feet from a house to
Yeah,
shoot
it's
a bow.
No,
wild
it
to
ma
me.
it makes it super hard. It's just because they're all liberal. That's the
Mhm.
main difference. A lot of Western Mass people are understanding of hunting and all that stuff, but like I have to work really hard to get hunting permission from people that are like vegans and stuff like that. Just I have to work exceptionally hard to do that, and I work in sales, so I don't mind doing that
Talking.
by any means and going to talk to strangers. So you just have to give them clear expectations because you're a stranger, you've never met them. So I try to build trust with them and do different things before. Sometimes I don't even ask hunting permission at first. But
So what do you
anyway,
do?
so
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't you dive into that a little bit deeper for
okay.
personal reasons and for the listeners? Walk
Well,
us
I
through that.
won't give away all my secrets, but one of the things I'll do is like when I'm say if I okay, so I found this buck. So I found this buck. I was driving around, saw him in a field, and then I found him again in someone's backyard. All this land is landlocked, like you said, 500 feet for me. I have to be around from someone's house. So because of that rule, the way to get around it is you get permission from multiple houses within that, and then you're fine. Then you could hunt from someone's backyard if you wanted. That's the difference, but you have to have written permission based on the bylaws of each town. So when I try to get hunting permission, I'll either ask to put up a trail camera. Usually people are a little bit scared about that. You have to give them clear expectations. I'm going to point it away from your house. They just don't want surveillance on their property. So reading the situation, I determine that. Another thing I'll do is I'll be like, hey, I'll cut your grass with your own lawnmower, different things like that. So I have the time to like do chores for people if I really need it, but that's only if I know a buck's in that area. I don't waste my time doing that by any means. I'll do wildlife photography. I also work for a pest company in the summertime, so I can be like, hey, we can do pest control for you and I'll give you a good deal. Um, I know plumbers that do the same thing, that do like work for people to get permission to hunting properties. There's many different ways, but I got permission long before I worked when I was in like when I was 18, just knocking doors. But one of the main ways that I do is like name dropping people I know in the area from talking to them and getting permission. So once you get one, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And even if you don't get permission from them, just be like, hey, I was just talking to Jimmy down the street, say his name, say, they didn't give me permission, or I talked to them and they're thinking about it. They're going to get back to me, but I just wanted to talk to you about hunting. And then I'll just kind of do that. Most of the time, I don't bring up hunting. I'll just talk about myself and kind of like who I am as a person and gain trust. Because if you just say, like, hey, I was just wondering, can I like hunt on your property and kind of like kill a deer and stuff like that? They're gonna be like, what the F are you doing on my property? Like, go away. So there's not necessarily, I don't know. I kind of just sell myself and try to be a good person instead of just shoving hunting down their throat, if that makes sense. So sometimes that takes time. Like I'll just go introduce myself to someone. I won't even ask for hunting permission. I'll go back a month later or a week later and I'll be like, hey, I saw you're outside. Like, just wanted to say hi to you and talk to you. Start talking again, then bring up the trail camera, then bring up something else. Or like, oh, do you mind if I shed hunt your property? I might never put a trail camera, never shed hunt there, but at least I got permission from that. If I want to gun hunt a property, I will never ask to gun hunt. I will ask to bow hunt first, even if I never do there, and then I will ask to gun hunt because people don't want to just let you on with a weapon. So like I do it over a timeline usually, unless I know a buck's there and it's a new buck that I find out about.
And it
So
means business at that point.
yeah, then I'm straight to the point. Like I had a lady tell me this is a cool story, and this is how we get to the mass buck later, the second one. So I knock on this guy's door and he was like, yeah, like I don't mind like if you hunt or whatever. And I was like, oh, sweet. And then I see the wife start creeping out from behind the door and she's like, what is he asking about? Because he said yes before like asking her. And the number one thing you don't want is to like create bad blood between them. So I just made a joke to him. I was like, "Oh, I'm not here to like stab your wife in the back. Like I don't want any bad blood, just deer blood," and just make him laugh like that, just like a joke. And then I was like, "Yeah, so I don't want to like create any problems between you two. I'll just tell you what's going on." And I was like, "If you just want to come out on the deck." So I like called her out of her own home and was just confident about it. And I was like, yeah, so I'm just going to go hunting back on your property. And I understand nobody likes trespassers. Nobody wants people just walking on their land. So that's why I come and I'm respectful and I want to talk to you guys. And usually when you do that, they're like, whoa. And then half the meat that I get in mass, I usually donate like hunters for the hungry or like to soup kitchens. So like I can push on that if I need to. And then they're like, oh, okay, you're not just hunting for the antlers. And then this is the biggest thing. I say I don't shoot does and fawns because I know there's big bucks in this area. So I was like, I won't shoot does or fawns. I'm just going after a couple big bucks. In this case, for the moose buck, I was like, I just want to hunt that one deer. And they were like, oh, just that one deer? Okay. And Seek One does the same thing. So if you say that and you stick to that, you're likely to get your foot in the door on more properties. She said, no, I don't want you to hunt. We'll get back to you. I was like, yeah, this is kind of just like a timely thing. I spend a lot of time coming out here. So I'm just trying to get a response. Do you mind if and then I talk about myself. She's like, starts thinking about it. And then I brought it up one more time for like to try to close her. And she's like, yeah, that's fine. Here's my phone number. I'm like, sure, I'll text you every time I come.
And it was a win.
Yeah. And that was like one of the biggest properties I needed to harvest the buck. So
That's crazy. See, Steve, we gotta grow a set of cojones, bro. We need, you know what? We're just gonna get Kyle. We're gonna call Kyle. Kyle, come down to Connecticut. I need you to just kind of schmooze over these old ladies, just so we can go kill
Yeah.
this buck. You can shoot our number 3. We're gonna shoot 1 and 2. You can have 3. All right, Kyle?
I've
I'll knock
actually
on
had
the
people
door.
offer for me to do that, funny enough.
You can start your own business. You can just be like a business agent.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, I don't
just
want
go
to
to
be
your
that
car.
guy that started that mass suburb business.
What is it?
There's some like Boston bow hunting company. This guy did the same thing that I do and got like a list of permissions, but then he would like sell them to people that were part of his club to let people
Jesus.
on permissions and stuff. And I guess it got like a whole bad name and stuff. And I don't want to have to deal with
Sounds
that.
Oh,
terrible.
I got you. All
I
right, so
don't.
take us through this mass buck. The first mass buck,
Yeah,
because we have a lot to go here.
yeah. So I don't know what your time.
You
How
good?
long do you want me to make it? Oh,
You're
okay.
fine.
Trevor will get a little grumpy. You'll know when he gets tired.
Yeah, so this buck I was driving, scouting different fields, and that's not something I would have ever done before in the past. But there was one ag field that I sat at sunset, probably springtime, like late spring. So they were starting to grow nubs, and there had to be like 15 bucks in this field. Like I'm not even kidding. Like I've never seen 15 bucks in New England ever together. Like that just doesn't happen. And there happened to be in this one field. So I'm like, okay, there's a huge population of deer down there. And I originally found out about the town through a Facebook page. They were posting a bunch of big deer in the past on it. So I was like, okay, I know this town has a lot of deer. I'm just gonna go from there, and that's one way that I'll find places as I'll look up people's last names on like Facebook pages and on X, and then find their addresses, and then go knock on their neighbors' doors because they're usually a Karen and love the deer, so I usually knock their neighbors instead. um, but I found this deer, and I was just driving around. I was like, "Holy crap, this is huge!" And then I filmed him like throughout the summer. Like I didn't post this on my YouTube that's coming up or other things because I want to keep the area close to me because there's another big one there. But I was just like, this buck is huge. I need to find out where he's going to be because I know as soon as he sheds his velvet, he's going to skedaddle. So about June, July, I filmed him. August, I saw a shift. All the deer disappeared from the field. Everybody knew about this field. I mean, people would be lined up with their cards, like deer watchers, like people, hunters would like watch these deer. So I went down the road about a mile and I drove down this lady's long driveway. So like you have to have balls to do this because my parents or like other people would be like freaked out to drive down some private driveway. And they all say no trespassing, but I just drove down it and I knock on the person's door. I'm like, hey, I want to get permission. And before I knock on the door, I look up on the hill of their private property and I see the buck with another 8 pointer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where he's been hiding. I'm a mile and a half from where I saw him originally. I never even thought that it was the same buck at first. And then I looked back at film after I asked that person. The person says no. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So then I go to all their neighbors, and that's when I start going haywire, knocking doors, getting access. Even if people wouldn't give me access to their property, this town didn't have a bylaw for like you couldn't hunt on unposted land. So that was a benefit. Is I'd be like, hey, can I cut through your property to go hunt these woods? And it was literally, how would I explain this? It's like a 300-yard stretch, and I got access to cut from this cul-de-sac that was on private land to the woods, and there were scrapes everywhere. There was licking branches and scrapes, and normally I don't care about scrapes because they're usually secondary scrapes that are useless to hunt over. But this was just tore up, and I mean, some of like one of them was like a car door sized scrape, and I'm like, okay, this is being used. I'm gonna put a camera here like immediately. So I scouted it, and then there's a swamp down on the other side of the hill, and I mean I'm in a neighborhood, so like I'm like right at the legal limit of like distance wise from houses. And in the swamp, I could tell there's beds and stuff. There wasn't crazy amount of sign that I wanted, but I was like, hey, I know he's here. This is where I need to be. And probably 600 yards from the private land I was on, there was tree stands everywhere because there was some unposted private that was a big chunk of woods. But I knew this buck wasn't going to walk through there because it's a wide open oak flat where there's I think there was 8 tree stands and maybe 500-yard stretch. So I mean, these deer were getting pressured like crazy, just not where I was. So I found a bunch of hot white oaks and where the primary scrape area was, and I found out they're bedding right next to this main road down in like kind of a ditch. And I was like, that's a really weird place for them to bed, but I mean, it's a main road. They would get hit if they ran that way, but they would just come up the hill the other way to get to the primary scrape. And I mean, it wasn't a big chunk of land. It was just in between 2 fields and all the houses in people's backyards. So it was kind of a funnel, a pinch point, a primary scrape area, and a white oak area. So it's perfect. There's food, bedding, anything they need, water. So I set up there the opening day. After getting all these trail camera photos, I was getting photos at 6:45 a.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 3 p.m. When do you see a mature buck at 3 p.m.? I don't get him on my trail cameras very often at 3 p.m., but he was showing up consistently. So I'm like, okay, he's there. I'm going to keep being patient for opening day. New Hampshire opens. I go to Maine, then I go to New Hampshire. New Hampshire, I don't kill anything. I'm just waiting for a bigger one. Then opening day, I go in 2 or 3 hours before sunrise because I'm like, sometimes he's in there way earlier from sunrise, and I just want to get in there so I don't spook him. So I left my house at like 3 a.m. I got in at like 5, and I think sunrise was at 7 or whatever it was. Set up, and it was the full moon. So it's 3 days after the full moon, I think was October 2nd. So that was the opening. So I'm like, if he's going to be moving, today's the day. A fork horn came out, then an 8-pointer came out. And people would say I'm crazy to pass the 8-pointer, but I knew that they were in the same bachelor group. And then he just starts walking, and I just see the giant rack come out and just chocolatey horns. I'm like, oh gosh, here he comes. So I'm panicking. I get my bow out and I try to get my camera the best I can on him, and I'm like, meh, meh, meh. And he's almost down the hill, so I'm angling down. He's quartering away, and I let it fly, and I see it bury quartering away from here. I figured I hit the opposite shoulder, but like I shot pretty far back on purpose because he was quartering. And I was like, oh, I don't know if it was a good shot, but I saw 31 inches of penetration. Like they went all the way to the fletching. So I'm like, he's got an arrow in him. I got down, didn't find an arrow. I immediately backed out. I was like, there's not going to be a blood trail if the arrow's still in him. So I started to panic. I was like, oh, I'll give him 12 hours because I thought I like gut shot him. And of course, on the opening day of Mass this year, and why most people haven't had success, it was like 80 degrees that day. It's came off of like 40-degree lows to like 85 degrees. So I'm like, okay, the deer's gonna go bad. What the frick? So I went back like 5 hours, 6 hours later, found the arrow. It was a pass through, which I didn't think it was, but it was. And then 100 yards later, I found him, and that's kind of the reaction you guys, genuine reaction of what I saw. So,
That's wild. Like,
and
and
this deer was all of 220 pounds, like easy.
Jesus Christ. And you worked real hard to kill this deer. I mean, like that's no joke. Like trying to get that granting that permission and after that deer, and that's no joke. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an emotional process because people would say, "Oh, you got on opening day. That's easy." That journey started long before. I've never gone in that many times, like freshen up scrapes with like my pee and like move the stuff. Like I worked really hard to that, and I didn't put all my cookies in one jar because I didn't think he would stay there. Like after that week, most of the other bucks moved out of there. So I'm glad I caught him at the time I
That was
did.
his zone.
Yeah, like he was in there at least once a day.
So he didn't go far.
Did he hit that
No,
scrape that morning?
I didn't let him get there.
Oh, okay, but he was heading towards it.
Yeah, I mean they were all heading towards it. Yeah.
That was just that community
Nor
scrape and
yeah, normally like they would feed on the white oaks where I was in the afternoon and then hit the scrape. So most of my scrape activity when I hunt scrapes is the afternoon, but that morning because of like the big change in temperature, they were on their feet even though it's getting hotter, they wanted to get up early and get up there. And I believe it was the 3 days after the full moon. That's why he was moving earlier than normal. But he came right in and 6:50 or 7 a.m. and popped him. So
So that's
got
the
lucky.
Mass, and then now New Hampshire.
Yep. So the New Hampshire was a public land deer. I passed that deer like 3 or 4 times. He wasn't very big. I've been after a 150-inch 12 point, but he's in the big woods, so I'm letting him rest because I don't have a core area. I mean, the deer moves 8 miles like every other day. Like people have sheds of him and photos of him super far away. He just moves a bunch. So I don't have him tracked down, so I'm gonna hunt him in muzzleloader or gun season because I don't really gun hunt, but this year I really want to try to get after it. So
And track.
yeah, so not necessarily just tracking, but just like going still hunting with a muzzleloader because
Hmm.
we don't usually get snow that
Right.
early in the season, but who
So
knows? We'll see.
so let's tear right into the second mass deer because that's kind of crazy, and there's a lot of trials and tribulations to this whole
Yeah.
hunt, and let's kind of play this back step by step.
Yeah, so I found this deer the same way, driving through the suburbs. I've hunted this particular town in years past, so I knew somewhat where deer were located. But I was driving down this road and I just see a velvet rack that's 20 inches wide. And I'm like, holy mother, like that thing's got a huge frame. Its tines weren't huge, but I was like, holy crap. And then I started to do the same thing. I knocked a million doors, tried to get permission. And this one lady had 40 acres out of the suburbs, which is a lot of land. So I knew the deer would be pretty focused on there. I tried to work her, wine and dine her. Her family's basically lived there for 200 years, and she's like, "Oh, I don't really want to." But her daughter said yes, but then she came back to me. I was like, "My mom doesn't want to." So maybe when she dies, which won't be too long, she's like 85. maybe maybe when she passes, I'll be able to get on
God
there.
rest her
But
soul, but I'm hanging a tree stand right here.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I scouted on the properties. I got permission adjacent to hers, and I bumped like 125, 130-inch 9 point, and then there's a bunch of different bucks on there. There's two big ones, and the rest are small, and a couple does, and that place is lit up right now. Like there's scrapes everywhere. So I went back there as my first sit as well. Your first sit's always your best sit. So I
Mm.
went there and I was like, okay, I haven't scouted here a bunch, but I knew the deer was there. I didn't put in a trail camera because I didn't want to spook them. I just figured I'd let it sit. So October 16th is in zone 9. That's when it opens, is opening day. So I went in there at night and it was supposed to rain all night, but then stop at sunset. So I'm like, okay, obviously a buck wants to freshen up his scrape after the rain ends. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And this was also 3 days directly after the new moon. New moon was the 13th. This was the 16th. Again, I thought that would be a good time to go because I know a lot of people have had their biggest bucks on those days, in between those 1, 2, or 3 days after or before a new moon. So I went in there, set up on the scrape, and then I'm on my phone while it's pouring rain, and I'm talking to the bow hunt mass guy, Eric. He's like, "You need to post this moose buck on Instagram so I can post it." And I was
Great
like,
impression, by the way.
"Oh, sorry."
Poor
That's not what
Eric.
he's like. I'm
Eric's a
sorry. I'm
diehard
sorry.
listener of the podcast too, so you're definitely gonna get shit for that, bud. Just so you know, like he listens
No,
to every single episode. That's my boy.
no, I love him so much, but he was like, "You need to post it." I was like, "Dude, I'm trying. My fingers aren't even working. Like, with how much rain was pouring on me." And then I look up and there's like a 5 point out in front of me, and I'm like, "Gosh dang it, Eric! Like, I'm too worried about making like a bio for this deer, like the explanation of the story." And then I was like, I texted him. I'm like, "Eric, I'm putting the phone away." So right after I did that, like 15 minutes later, another buck came out. This is still pouring rain. So it's like an hour and a half before sunset. I'm like, what the heck are these deer doing up so early? But they both made their way out to this private field. Um, and it's just ryegrass. It's a cattle farm. It's not like there's no like special ag or food. And then I just hear, and I'm like, oh crap. And if behind me, I look to my left, I just see this big rack of tines come through and rake a tree. So I'm like, okay, start getting my tree arm's crappy. It's like a real tree arm, and I lean it around. But of course, that day I used a lens that was way too big. It was like the 200 millimeter or whatever, and I didn't have my other one. So I'm zoomed all the way out. Even with that, it's like zoomed in close to the ground. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And of course, that day I was lazy and I didn't set up a GoPro or a secondary angle. I'm a hunter first, not a photographer. So the buck comes in and the buck doesn't hit the primary scrape I was hunting, but he makes another one behind me. He's at this point, he's at 8 yards. So I'm pissing my pants seeing this giant thing just shovel leaves and dirt behind him. And the camera is just like making a bunch of noise and he's not noticing because he's all rutted up. So he gets to a certain point on this rock wall crossing that's like, if he crosses, then I can shoot him. So he crosses the rock wall at like 5 yards. I'm getting all my bow ready, trying to worry too much about getting it on film. And then he starts walking directly away from me. I set up almost too much on the trail. So it's kind of like he was facing towards me, quartering. I had a shot, but I was trying to get on film, which is the biggest mistake I've made this season. And he keeps walking, but he's quartering away. So he gets behind like a beech tree where one of the scrapes is and is about to hit it. So I stop him and I try to get the camera as close as I can. And I pull back my bow. And at this point, he's at 20 yards because he's walked away from me. And he turns towards me and I just pull and I'm like, meh, 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 pull back. And you hear a thwack on video. And I'm like, this is the first year I've ever had target panic where I don't know where I hit him. So I my first impression was I missed. That was the first thought I had. And then I go down to the ground. I had a Luminoc, but for some reason after I shot it, it turned off. So I thought the arrow was in the deer. I was like, okay, this is weird. The arrow's not there. I go down to the ground. It's buried up to the broadhead in the dirt. There's barely any blood on it. There's no arrow or blood on the fletching. So I start to panic. I'm like, what the heck? And where the deer ran off about 50 yards and then stood there and looked at me. So I'm like, oh, I probably missed him. I go to the like 50 yards away, buckets of blood. I mean, like one, two, three, four, five. Like there was five big patches of like clotted red blood. And I was like, maybe I hit him in the leg or shoulder or liver. My first thought was liver because it was really dark. I was like, huh. But it was really, some of it was bright. So I was like, maybe it was a leg or something. And then I called my buddies. We tracked him later that evening, made it about 80 yards. He like crossed a log and there was like a speck left. And then I grid searched the next day for like 6 miles doing roundabouts and we never found him. So I honestly don't know where I hit, but I put a cell camera in there after I shot him. And after hiking through all that, there hasn't been a single deer on the camera. So maybe he's done for the season. I mean, it hasn't even been a week since I shot him. It was like 4 days ago. But
Jeez. So
yeah, that was pretty depressing.
yeah, you worked your butt off to try and get back in there and try and find him again, but you don't really have any type of like. Do you know where you think you hit him or no?
Oh man. No, my first impression was shoulder, but I honestly don't know. Like that was because there were so many little branches in the way. I was kind of taking a risky shot because I was like at the point where I was like, screw it, I already can't get it on film when I easily could have had a shot with not filming it at 5 yards. And I was like, I'm never gonna put that first again because
What
I
was
did a
the
disservice to the animal.
what do you think? What was kind of the reaction of the deer when you shot?
His tail was up, which was a bad sign. So he jumped probably like 5 trots and then went behind this big pine tree and just stood there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, huh. Usually, I've heard like if they jump off and then walk off, it's usually a gut shot.
Hmm.
There was no guts or muscle on the arrow, but it must have been a pass through, right? Because there was some blood on it
Right.
and there was a blood trail and it was into the ground. So I'm like,
I
either
wonder
I
if it was just straight muscle.
and that's what it could have been. I was like, well, it probably wasn't the backstrap or the bottom because there would have been hair. There's no hair.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I pride myself on being a good tracker, and I we couldn't find him, so I think he's alive.
I
But
mean, that's part of it, man. If anybody that says that that hasn't put, that hasn't put a bad shot on a deer hasn't hunted enough. And that's the
yeah,
truth. I mean, like these things happen. This is part of the game, you know?
yeah. And I think I've shot like in the 4 years of hunting like 16 or 18 deer, and I've never lost one. And that was just depressing for me. I felt so bad for the deer and also mad at myself that I tried to film like I hate when people say like, "Oh, you're kind of a YouTuber and that's what your job is to do." Like one of my buddies literally said like, "Oh, well that's your job is to film." And like, "No, it isn't. This is a hobby. This is my love and I love filming for like my future family and for the family I have now. Like that's I do it because it's fun, but man, it hurt to when I had a 5 yard shot broadside and I didn't take it because the camera wouldn't go there. And
Mm-hmm.
I had already done that for moose kind of and for the main one, so I already felt bad to kind of my viewers and myself that I didn't get on film. But the New Hampshire one, that one turned out perfect and got like 230,000 views on Instagram reels because the Luminok went right through him and he died 70 yards from a heart shot. So like that was cool, but of course it doesn't work like that the way you want with a big buck. They come in when you're not expecting it from the wrong side of the tree where your arm is, and it's just yeah, it sucks, but it's a long season. I mean, I we haven't even hit the rut.
Right.
So, I mean,
Well,
but
I will say this though. You said there was a buckets of coagulated blood.
say that again.
You said a lot of the blood was already clumped up and coagulated.
Not necessarily. Like there was just a little bit of like a black clotted like
Okay.
mix, but like the first impression was like it was painted on the leaves, like the
Hmm.
first couple
I
petals.
might maybe I misheard you, but I was thinking back to the podcast we did with Matt Berger on tracking, and I remember him saying that a lot of times muscle blood is the one that clots and
Mm,
coagulates on the leaves first. So I'd like
could have
to
been.
think that maybe it was a muscle hit. He's fine. He's gonna live, and you're gonna see him again later in the season. You know what I mean?
Fingers crossed. Yeah, he's like 120, 130 inch deer, so I'd love to see him again. It's just yeah, I felt bad. I just didn't want him to be dead. That
Right.
was like the biggest
and
thing
not be
in
able to
mass.
find
You
him, right?
yeah,
Right.
in mass you can't use tracking dogs.
Right.
And then I was also in a town where you can't go over lines without getting written permission. So that made it 100 times harder too. So I ended up getting permission from people to go check where he went. And I went through a swamp like up to my knees deep looking for him and just nothing.
Well, hopefully he just shows up on camera, man, and that just you get the playback and you just do it again.
Yeah.
That's part of hunting. Like you'd hate to say it like that, and there's a lot of lost sleep in the nights of waiting and trying to find them and whatever the case may be. But that's all in the game. I mean, anybody,
Yeah.
like I said, anybody that says that they haven't lost a deer hasn't hunted enough because it happens. It's part of the game. Everything, especially with archery tackle. I mean, it's just the way that the cookie crumbles, man. And people,
I just wish it was on a doe, not well, I don't want it on any deer, but
right?
it just a buck of a lifetime for new
So
anglers.
you're saying just
Sucks.
because it has antlers that it should have happened to it?
No, it's because he was mature. It has nothing to do with his antlers.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you tell the landowners that. No, just kidding.
No, that was the one that I didn't tell the landowners I injured a buck. I just
No, you
or
would.
the landowner that I had
Yeah.
permission. I was like, yeah, nope.
Nope.
I didn't want to tell him.
Well, it is what it is, man, and you just wait and see what
Yeah,
happens. He'll show back up on camera, dude. You'll end up killing that deer, and it'll be just another story. It's just it'll be part of The chapters of the story.
Yeah,
Was it still
I
rain?
don't name my deer as much. Like moose, that's the only one I'll name.
Was it still raining when that happened? You said it was pouring that morning. Was it raining when he came in the shot and all that stuff?
So it was the afternoon. So it was pouring, and then 30 minutes before sunset is when he came in, and it was not at that time. It was just like drizzling. Yeah. So it's all on video, but
What
yeah.
do you? How do you do your How do you film in the rain?
Put my hat over the camera. I'm not a photographer, dude.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I
I
use
just
a
covered it
gallon
up.
Ziploc bag, so I call it my camera
Okay,
con.
there you go.
Camera condoms, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Kyle, I got one last question, man, before we let you go. And it's been a
sure.
successful season for you, but I want to know what drives you outdoors. Not your Corolla.
Well, Jesus Christ, I would say probably a religious perspective. Like that's honestly the closest place I feel to God. And I know everybody's like, oh, I don't want a religious spiel, but I'm sorry, you're gonna get it. That's just the way that I feel. I love using my platform for people to become closer to God because it did change my life. Hunting has changed my life. The outdoor drive for wanting to be in the woods has changed my life and gotten me out of a lot of situations where I think I would have lost my way if it weren't
Go into
for the
that, man. I want to
outdoors.
hear
So
about it.
yeah, it's not like I've had a bad life or anything, but I grew up religious, and a lot of my friend groups, like in high school and stuff, decided to go other paths that weren't the best. So I had to basically say, hey, I don't want to be friends with you guys anymore, and kind of just put myself away from that. And hunting was like an outlet for me besides sports. I've always played sports in high school and college and stuff, so that was one of my outlets. But hunting definitely drove that. I went through a breakup and got back surgery, hip surgery, different things that stopped me from doing things that I love, and hunting's gotten me through all those as well. So for anyone that hasn't done it that's listening, I'm sure you're already hunters, but if you haven't for years and you're listening to this podcast, just get outside, even if you're not hunting. I always thought to myself, would I come out in a tree stand and sit here even without a bow or a tag? And honestly, I think I would just to watch. Like it's just fun. You get the heart beating every time you see a deer, no matter if it's doe or not. And if you're not, you should probably quit hunting.
No, I can attest to that, man. Where like I think and I haven't really talked about this a lot on podcasts, but like there's a lot of kids that I grew up with that either didn't make it or aren't doing so good for themselves, um, because of like the times that we lived in, the times of real bad drugs and so on and so forth, and we still deal with this a lot every single day. But like hunting and fishing changed my life, and I could have went down a way worse path. I mean, a lot of the people that I hung around with were not good people. I mean, that was just the way it is, but fishing was one of those outlets for me. And then slowly as I started to get into my early teens, then it became hunting, obviously, because that's what the kind of thing that you did. I played sports, but really wasn't my thing. Like I wanted to hunt and fish. So like just like yourself, man, like it'll change you. And and I say this a
Yeah.
ton. Like you see a lot of these young kids, like every day in guiding, you see these young kids getting into it, and I tell their parents all the time. I mean, like keep these kids in this because in this day and age, like they need this. The outdoors is
Yeah.
gonna save those kids. I promise you. Like, and they really is. And we see it on them. We see it on the big scale because we're doing it now, but they need it a little
Yeah.
bit more than we do, especially in today's day and age. So
And it builds freezing your butt off in the woods. Like when I went turkey hunting when I was younger, and like I was freezing my butt off. Like it was miserable.
it'll
But
make a man out of you, right?
because it's so hard, that's why we love it, right?
Yep.
Especially in New England, it's not easy.
No.
So
Well, Kyle, man, I want to congratulate you on your season thus far, man. I know it's not over yet, and you're gonna keep driving on, and that big buck's gonna end up coming back in Massachusetts. I got that feeling you're gonna kill that thing, man. And we can't thank you enough for jumping on with us. And it we are interested to see the path that you end up getting with, KB Outdoors and all that stuff. Can you just let everybody know kind of where they can find you if they want to go and follow along with you and what you got going on?
Yep. So it's just my initials, KBB Outdoors on Instagram. I think it's 2.0 because there was someone else that had it already. And then I also have the Bows, Bros, and Bucks podcast, but I've been putting hunting first. That's more of an off-season thing. And then my YouTube's just KBB Outdoors. So
Awesome, man. Like I said, man, thank you. I appreciate it. Congrats on your season. And for everyone else, thanks for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.